Protests had erupted during the DNC's summer meeting in San Francisco after one of the committees voted down a resolution calling for a climate debate. So now that climate debate would have involved, of course, the 2020 presidential primary candidates on the Democratic side. Now, the committee, which is the resolutions committee, ended up voting 8-17 against holding a climate debate. So now that's disastrous, right? Especially with what's going on in the Arctic and what's going on with the Amazon, what's going on with climate change overall. And so, yeah, absolute disaster. Now, the meeting actually came after pressure from activists and environmentalists. And not only that, but you also had presidential candidates that are saying, yes, let's have a climate debate. Let's do that. One of the biggest voices was Jay Inslee, former Washington governor. Now, look, Jay Inslee wasn't great on healthcare, but his signature plan was climate change. And so he had a strong plan. Bernie Sanders, no doubt, has the strongest plan. And he was also, looking forward to doing a climate debate. Because right now, any debate that you see on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC never really talks about the climate. There's maybe one or two questions. They spend at tops 5 minutes on the climate, and then they go on to other issues. Well, we need a climate debate because right now, climate change is an emergency. It's an emergency, and we have to do something about it now. So now, after all this pressure, of course, the DNC said no. Again, shame, travesty, especially for anybody who gives a crap about the climate. And there's a lot of people who do. So now, after the vote, there's a lot of criticism from organizers and activists. Let me go to Twitter and quote Naomi Klein. She said, "This matters. A DNC that won't bend the rules of its debate playbook in order to treat climate change like an emergency will not support policy that is transformative enough to actually stop the emergency. Luckily, they aren't the only ones with a vote." Sunrise Bay Area, which some of its members had started after the vote, getting up and singing "Whose Side Are You On?" Said this, breaking, despite overwhelming support from the Republican candidates, the DNC Resolutions Committee just voted down the resolution to hold a climate debate. And Antonia Juhaz says, the DNC just voted against the resolution for a climate debate. Youth with the Sunrise Movement and others have risen in protest and are standing on their seats. Quote, "We are afraid for our lives. We're afraid of an uninhabitable planet. Which side are you on now?" Well, look, if it's not clear enough, the DNC is apparently on the side of the donors. Now, more reaction here. Sunrise volunteer Alex Morrison said California was literally on fire last year from the wildfires. "We know firsthand that climate breakdown is killing people and destroying livelihoods right now. Time is running out to save our generation. Young people need to know which candidates for president are treating the climate crisis like the emergency that it is." Well, an answer for that as well, Bernie Sanders in his $16.4 trillion plan, that is the Green New Deal. Now, another Sunrise activist shouted after the vote, "We deserve a chance at a livable future." Absolutely. Isn't it amazing how young people have taken up the mantle? They shouldn't have to. A lot of these people are high school students or possibly even younger. And they're basically saying, the adults, you're supposed to be adults. You're not. So we have to do what the adults refuse to do and actually make our own future. That's a huge burden. And I don't think we understand, well, maybe we do, but I don't think there's a lot of people that quite understand the immense burden we're putting on young people. Look, Republicans and corporate Democrats love to talk about, oh, look at the debt that we're putting on the next generation. Look at the $20 trillion in debt. Look at we're leaving that to our kids, but they never talk about what we're leaving to the kids when it comes to the environment, when it comes to having drinkable water and breathable air. Nobody ever talks about that. Nobody. So you don't see it, right? So now the DNC, Their defense of this is saying, oh no, we didn't want to do a climate debate because we feared that it would sow discord in the base and hamper the eventual nominee in the general election. Well, then what's the point of having a primary? No. Here's why. I mean, is it why? It could it be because the front runner right now, Joe Biden, with his has this middle ground approach that kind of makes people a little angry. Could it be that? Could it be that that's creating the discord? No wonder they're worried. Again, you have the differences between Senator Bernie Sanders and his Green New Deal and Joe Biden's middle ground approach, which, by the way, continues to invest heavily in fracking, in natural gas technology. But hey, as Dr. Joe Biden says, and this is probably the DNC position, you just need to swallow a bit and vote for my husband. Sorry, Joe, but just because you settled for your husband doesn't mean we have to. Now, look, if you're voting for Joe Biden in the primary, and this is important, I'm saying this, if you're a Biden voter in the primary election, then look, in an election where Bernie Sanders polls consistently better against Donald Trump, then it shows that you don't care, that you're not paying attention. And look, a lot of things, by the way, and maybe that's a little too harsh, but because right now, most people polled aren't really paying attention to the election. They're not really paying attention to a lot of the people. And so they hear Joe Biden. It's like, I don't know, the guy was vice president. I guess he was all right. It's name recognition, right? So, and that's interesting because once people hear more of Joe Biden, the less they like him. Now, it's funny because we had a candidate like that on the Democratic side last time. Hillary Clinton, the more you heard from her, the more she made speeches, the less people liked of her. Disaster, right? So now, if later on in the primary, you're still for Joe Biden, well then, even if he's still in the race, then it shows that you don't really care a lot about the climate. Now, there is one decent piece of news, right? Now, the committee did pass an amendment. Now, this amendment was put forward by Travis Robertson Jr. Now, he's the state chair in the South Carolina Democratic Party, right? Now, that amendment did reverse the ban on presidential candidates participating in non-DNC sanctioned climate events. So before, they're like, the DNC was like, you can't do any debates. If you do any other debate other than DNC sanctioned debates, then you will not do any DNC debates at all. So, basically, and that's important because those debates, while they do create a lot of sound bites, etc., they're watched by a lot of people, millions of people. So, you lose your chance on that. That does not help your campaign, especially if you're someone with a lot smaller of a name recognition, somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard, for example. Well, then that's going to be disastrous for your campaign, right? So, thankfully, though, at least that amendment passed. And so Sunrise Movement spokesperson Sophie Karasak said of that, quote, "This partial victory shows the strength of the grassroots movement and the power of young people. In the coming days and months, we'll keep fighting to make sure the DNC and Tom Perez treat the climate crisis like the emergency that it is and give it the airtime and attention that it deserves." So I guess that part's not bad. And look, we know the DNC is filled with, too filled with corporate money to host a climate debate. But that doesn't stop another organization from holding a debate. I'm just saying, you want a climate debate, we're going to have to look outside of the DNC, which is probably for the best anyway. And even if somebody like a Biden doesn't show up to that debate, we know Bernie Sanders probably will. And if he does, it's guaranteed to get a lot of attention, which is exactly what the climate crisis actually deserves. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.